Hey, good evening, everyone. Representative Brad Halbrook from the 107th in Shelbyville. Thanks for tuning in to our live stream tonight, Roundtable and Town Hall. We got an important election law update, a big 143-page amendment that's making its way through the General Assembly. Chris, what could possibly go wrong with a 143-page amendment?
Well, probably about 143 things could possibly go wrong because this is the puzzle palace and the factory of bad ideas. And so,
exactly. Well, welcome, Chris.
Yeah. You're welcome. Welcome to Illinois.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're live out there in Etherland, and hopefully we'll continue to be in demand after tonight. And we've got a special guest tonight that I'm honored to call him a friend and a compadre because we've worked together on some local grassroots volunteer training. These guys are on the cutting edge of what's going on in Illinois when it comes to stuff that's really, really important to us as citizens of the state. And at that point, Chris, I think I'm just going to open it up to Andy Bakker from Illinois Opportunity Project. And Andy, you're going to talk to us about this 143 or 4-page amendment dealing with election law changes that's coming. Andy, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Brad and Chris. Appreciate you guys having me. So yeah, we're going to talk about this election law amendment. First thing, I'm not a lawyer. Was a law school dropout. We kind of engaged with this. So at Illinois Opportunity Project, we're a 501c4 conservative nonprofit. Do a lot of grassroots work, and we ended up leading the coalition against ranked choice voting. And so that's kind of where we came to all of this and the crazy stuff that was coming out of the Ethics and Elections Committee. And I think the first thing to point out for viewers and people who may not be super familiar with the process is just that. It's the process. This bill was not passed out of committee originally, right? They did a bunch of subject matter hearings, right, and then they stuck every single one of the changes that they wanted to make to the election code into one amendment, and they amended a bill. It's SB 2123 that was originally about the mental health counseling compact. And so I don't really have a strong opinion about whether or not professional counselors should be able to offer their services across state lines. I'm sure there's good arguments for and against, but that doesn't have anything to do with elections. When they use these shell bills, it's a way of evading all accountability for the things that they want to do. And so this bill, again, 143 pages, there's a lot in there. There's some that's important. There's some that's really pretty silly. And, you know, my favorite thing was they had to add this into the election code, right? The lettering of candidates' names on a ballot shall be in both capital and lowercase letters, in conformance with the standard English language guidelines, unless compliance is not feasible, right? So this is the kind of stuff that they throw in there, but it's got a lot of other things too. You know, one of my main messages tonight is honestly, it could have been worse. We were fighting originally about 6 bills on ranked choice voting. If people don't know what ranked choice voting is, it is a scheme that's pushed by these out-of-state liberal billionaires to completely change our elections, right? Instead of going into the voting booth and voting for one person, I want Donald Trump or I want Joe Biden. Instead, we're going to go through and rank all 5, 6, 7 candidates, however many there are. This ballot looks like a grid. It's very easy to screw up. And if you don't feel like ranking Joe Biden among the candidates that you choose, guess what? Your vote's getting thrown out. If you don't figure it out, you know, your ballot will be exhausted. It will be discounted. So it's a complicated issue that we put a lot of time into beating back. And so what we ended up with was a task force. And so rather than implementing ranked choice voting in the presidential primaries this year, which is the bill that they all came behind at the end, they're going to have a task force. This task force is going to complete a report by the end of next March about the feasibility of doing this in 2028. One of the things that became really apparent really quickly was the advocates for ranked choice voting don't know how much it's going to cost. They weren't able to provide any numbers. The County Clerks Association estimated that it would cost $1.8 million just to switch over the equipment in Sangamon County. Sangamon County is not the largest county in the state, as you might have guessed. So this task force is going to do a number of things. There are members of the public who get to be appointed to it. We will engage with that process, and hope to get some of our folks on there. It is really uneven the way that these people are appointed, right? So Democrats in the House and Senate each get to put up 2 members and 2 members of the public. Republicans get to put up 1 member and 1 member of the public for each house. The governor gets to put up 4. The Secretary of State gets to put up another 1. So it's certainly better than getting ranked choice voting implemented right now. That's really a testament to the grassroots that we have in the state. The response was really pretty overwhelming on both witness slips and also just emails sent to the members and also the election officials, right? I mean, I think as we talk about all of these changes, and we will get past this ranked choice voting piece, it's important to remember that we should always be right, but we also should always be polite when we're talking to our election officials. There certainly are some really bad partisan actors out there. There's also a lot of just normal people who are trying to do their job and, follow the rules. And in Illinois, we have some really crazy rules that they're going to have to follow. So they came up really big because they don't want this either. And so, looking forward to getting on the task force and beating this thing back again. That's one place where, we at least got a little bit of a win for now and bought ourselves a little bit of time. There is another task force as we move on. They extended the task force on public funding of judicial elections, which I just think is the most ridiculous thing given how much money Governor Pritzker spent on the Supreme Court elections last year. For them to propose public funding at this point, I think is ridiculous. They didn't come up with a report, so they extended it. Here's another thing that could have been a lot worse. The Secretary of State's office in subject matter hearings, it was a bill that was sponsored by Jennifer Gong Gershwitz. The original bill would have allowed the Secretary of State to register anyone at any time using state money. As long as that person had a driver's license already, they could go out and spend state funds to do voter registration drives, right? And we're supposed to believe that this was going to be done in a nonpartisan fashion. That was a great question from Freedom Caucus member Blaine Wilhauer at the hearing was, okay, so if I hold a gun show where I live, will you come and register voters? And they said, well, sure. Okay. So what we ended up with, again, not good, but would have been worse. The Board of Elections is allowed to do voter registrations at naturalization ceremonies. They can't go out and ask people to do it, but they're going to provide information, right? And so this is not something that the Secretary of State's office, the Board of Elections, should be doing. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why these offices really across the country have decided that their job is registration and turnout and not administering free and fair elections. That's what we're stuck with. We're gonna really learn to miss Jesse Wyatt, I think, because the Alexei Giannoulias Secretary of State's office is really political, and it's only going to get worse. We've seen that with the, what they're calling book banning bills that changes the way that they're administering the library system. It's really going to get crazy at the Secretary of State's, and it kind of already has. One of the other kind of big ticket items that's, another barrier to keeping voter registration lists in this state is pre-registration of 16-year-olds. So that's in here. Anybody who is over the age of 16 can go up and register to vote. They can't vote, theoretically at least, legally, until they're 18, but they're going to be added to our rolls. And so why Democrats push for things like this is to have them on the rolls already, ideally for them in a permanent vote by mail situation already, so that they don't even have to worry about catching up with that person when they're 18, right? A lot can happen in between there. It opens the window to get the people that they think are going to vote their way already on the rolls. It's already a done deal. They can go spend their money registering other people. So that's in there. That's really a problem. There's all kinds of stuff also about, the way that we operate our nominating petition objection process and county committees and, forms and things like this. One thing that's really important I can bring up is election challenges afterward. And so it's been a few in a row. It seems like lately they all pop up in DuPage. Deanne Mazzocchi led a challenge against her election and found out that the clerk in DuPage was not verifying signatures. Similar situation for Bob Grogan. And so the powers that be in Springfield don't really appreciate those kind of challenges. In order to make it more difficult, what they've done is basically created a security deposit system. So if you have a problem in your election, you need to pay up front to undertake your objection. If the result is overturned, they will give you that money back, but you're going to have to put down that security deposit in order to get it. So, those I think are really the big ticket items. The other one we can say is that there is now going to be a requirement in jurisdictions with over 500,000 people. It used to be that you had to have one centralized voting location, right? What Democrats would love to see is the end of precinct voting. And so they do this in a number of ways. Vote by mail, I think, is number one, but also centralized voting locations. So this is a place in a county or in a city with its own election authority where everybody can go to. It doesn't matter where you live in the county, you can go to this centralized location. They have to offer curbside voting. And so we've now added another one of those per county. Really, a lot of these things, it seems like they're coming out of nowhere, or why would you do this, or what are you thinking? This was all of these, really, including the alternative voting systems like ranked choice voting, were all part of a plan that came together. If we can think all the way back to Citizens United, it's a long time ago. It was a very different political landscape, and at that time, these powers on the left really thought that Republican dark money was going to overwhelm everything, right? And so this was a time, when at least the prevailing wisdom was that large corporations supported Republicans. I don't know that that's the case today, but they set out to expand the electorate as much as they possibly could. And they've ticked off a lot of these boxes and places that they're going. So we got out of this session without ranked choice voting being implemented. We got out with pretty limited state-funded voter registration program. We got out without a lot of the vote by jail measures that came up in subject matter hearings, but it's not a good bill, and everybody needs to talk to their legislators and oppose. Again, it's SB 2123. Scheduled for third reading in the House here pretty soon, and then it'll go back to the Senate.
Right now, so there's a House amendment, right? Is that House floor amendment number 4, Andy?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
where all the language is about all the stuff you've talked about.
Correct.
Okay, good. House floor amendment number 4. You can find that on ilga.gov. Just type in that SB 2123, correct?
That's right.
One thing that we've noticed over time, and Brother Hallberg has spoken about this before, but how that our colleagues will get up and rail on how bad a bill is, but then they will say, well, it's not perfect, but it's a start. I was going to ask you if this was a start or if we need to throw the thing in the trash can like all this other stuff needs to go.
All of it needs to go. It's all bad. Just because it could have been worse, and it's tough, right? In Illinois, like that, a lot of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
No, this one needs to go. This is 21-23, and they do this so that they can say that it's got a little bit of something for everyone. Some of those members might not like the ranked choice voting piece, but they really want the pre-registration of 16-year-olds to say, I'll vote for the whole thing, because they put it into one omnibus anyway.
The good news is that they have all these task force, because my practical observation with the task force is whenever they do that, they're creating the illusion that they're going to do something that they never do anything. So that's good news also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, we're, cautiously optimistic, or feel like we, got a small victory this session in keeping them from going all the way with ranked choice voting. Who knows what happens in 4 years? They may be on to something else by that point. They made a big push. I think these are billionaires, right? And if you look on, great website is influencewatch.org. Pull up the influencewatch.org page for Fair Vote, which is the leading advocate group for ranked choice voting in this state and in others. And it's Soros, it's the Arnolds, it's Pierre Omidyar from eBay. And still they convince people that this is a nonpartisan reform. They use a lot of rent-a-Republicans to give it this, imagined image. They like to say, oh, well, Glenn Youngkin was elected using ranked choice voting. Well, guess what? Glenn Youngkin, first of all, it was during COVID. It was an unassembled convention where you had to be a delegate, not just a voter. Third, he led every single ballot. He would have won on a plurality ballot as well. It's just ridiculous, and not to go too far off the rails on ranked choice voting, but by the end they were saying the reason that we need this is because sometimes people vote for a presidential candidate who's already dropped out. Well, come on. So we're going to change the entire way that we operate our elections just because sometimes people vote for Pete Buttigieg after he already endorsed Joe Biden? We could put a piece of paper in there at 6 cents that says, like, please check if your candidate has dropped out already, and avoid that. It's ridiculous. To give you a little bit on the ranked choice voting, but this stuff was just so crazy. And I'm so glad that we were able to get the word out and let our, grassroots know about it. I'm, again, so impressed, and national folks that I've talked to are so impressed by what we did in Illinois. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful to come out of this session with a task force and not a ranked choice voting election next year. And so we'll engage with the task force, and we'll, keep beating back all this stuff.
Right. So, so this was, I think, nearly, if not every Republican in the committee voted against it. So that's a good thing. And, so the task force is what it is, right? That could be dangerous or not. But the good news is, like you said, at least they're not going to implement this here in the next election. And that's a good thing. Hopefully. Now, ranked choice voting is used in some other states, right? We most recently heard about some stuff in Alaska.
Yeah. So there are 2 states that use ranked choice voting statewide. Number one is Alaska, right? And so Alaska just elected a Democrat statewide in Alaska, and another, they also elected Lisa Murkowski, who was, pushing for some of this. In Alaska, they just had the lowest turnout election in the history of the state. They're first with ranked choice voting. The other state that uses it is Maine. Maine had a congressional race in, I believe it was 2018, Bruce Poliquin's race, where Democrat who did not get the most votes ended up winning, just like in Alaska. There are a number of cities across the country. It fails everywhere it's been tried. And so some of the places that you can really look at these failures that were well known is that New York City mayor's race, where it took weeks for them to get the results out. We remember the Democratic Iowa caucuses, which was a disaster, and it's basically led to them losing their caucuses. It's a caucus, so it is a little bit different than a primary or a general election. There was an example of, so this gets really far in the weeds, but we can look just this past year at an Alameda County school board race, which is Oakland, California. They went through, I think, 5 rounds of ranked choice voting tabulation, and at the end of the day, they came out and certified the wrong person. And they didn't find out until weeks after the fact. And the problem was that there were all of these voters who had failed to rank a first choice. And so they put somebody in second and somebody in third and fourth. And so the question becomes, well, what do you do with that? And it's not clear, right? And it might be different state by state or city by city, county by county. Does that mean if you fail to rank a first choice person, did you just screw up? Does that mean that your second choice is actually your first? Or does it mean that you wanted to sit out the first round, that you actually don't care what the first round is and you just want to put it over there? There's an argument to be made for either. And at the end of the day, they decided that actually those were first choice votes, and they had to recount all of these elections. But you can't really get an audit or a recount in the black box of ranked choice voting. Makes everything much, much more difficult. People who actually are election lawyers can, speak to the difficulty of trying to legislate something like that or litigate something like this. It's just insane. And so they, create these fake grassroots groups that are made up, that have no support on the ground, and hire really expensive lobbyists. They brought in the former Speaker of the Colorado State House. They brought in Amber McReynolds, who is now sits on the Joe Biden United States Postal Service Board of Governors. She ran the Vote from Home Institute and pretends to be a nonpartisan person. Look on her Twitter page and see her sitting there with Governor Pritzker saying, "This is my favorite governor." Also, I think she grew up in Illinois, but she, doesn't live here now. One of the best parts was they brought in somebody who runs the election authority in Utah County, Utah. This was the subject matter hearing on the Senate side. We didn't even know because the Cook County Clerk's office was on Zoom. We didn't even know they're there. I said, really? You're going to talk to me, somebody about Utah County, Utah? I have 16 languages. Do you know how many thousands of election judges I have to train? You have asked us to do all of these things, and now you want to add this extra layer on top of it. And all of that without being able to provide a number on how much it's going to cost, without being able to tell us how many counties are prepared to implement this change right now, which according to the State Board of Elections at the House subject matter hearing is 0. None of them are ready. It is worth saying that this task force, there's language included in there that makes reference to alternative voting systems, including ranked choice voting. So there are some others out there that are being pushed in a similar way. And what's kind of funny is if you look at the things that they say about each other, folks who will like approval voting or cumulative voting, which actually we have in Peoria, star voting, which is really insane. I'll get back to you in a second. They criticize each other in the same way that, we criticize a lot of these. And so that is a possibility. I mean, one of the things that is happening across the river in Missouri is those folks were able to keep a ranked choice voting ballot measure off the ballot. And so what did they do this year? First of all, they went and rented a bunch of Republicans because it's Missouri. But now they're pushing something called approval voting. And so in ranked choice voting, right, you put in this person's my first choice, my second choice, my third. Approval voting says vote for as many as you want. You got 5 candidates on the ballot. I could vote for 4. I could vote for 3. I could vote for 2. I could just vote for 1. Whatever you think, go for it. So it is possible that they come out of this and decide to change tactics. Again, my favorite one, not because I like it, because I think it's so silly and demonstrates the lack of seriousness from these election reform people. Star voting. Have you ever heard of star voting?
That's a new one.
Okay, so this is like you do a Yelp rating for all of the candidates. Okay, Chris Miller, 5 stars. All right, Brad Halberg, 3 stars. Okay, 2 stars for this guy, 1 star for that guy, and then they do an automatic runoff, right? So they're pushing a lot of crazy stuff. I totally expect some of that to come up on the task force. And this task force is going to have to come up with some numbers and make some recommendations about what we need in the code too. So we're going to beat it back. I mean, these people, and again, not to go too far on ranked choice, but it's likely to pop up in the Chicago City Council. We're likely to see some ballot measures in municipalities. They got one. So Evanston in 2022 voted to do ranked choice starting with the 2025 municipal election. If you live up here, like of course they would go to Evanston first. Makes sense. So it is going to pop up everywhere, right? Like, so these people are very well funded, and they're going to keep coming.
Yeah. So in Illinois, it takes 2 weeks to get the mail-in vote counted. What's this do for tabulation? I mean, it doesn't make it any less time.
No, weeks and weeks and weeks.
Weeks and weeks.
Yeah. No, it makes it's so much more difficult. That was one of the so in Alaska, Alaska's a very strange state, right? But they already have a centralized counting location. So they already send their ballots to one place. That's one thing that came up in subject matter. Again, Representative Ammons said, well, I think we could do this if we had a centralized voting location, right? I want to see everybody vote by mail. Maybe we could do it after that, but I think we got to do that first. That is one of the goals.
Was she recommending Champaign County to send them all to? Mail them all in?
I don't know about that.
That was my next question. We have the perfect guy for this job.
Right. Yeah, but it was very interesting. The way that people who have some level of familiarity with our election system, so there's no way we could do this. Give me a break. Yeah. It's Illinois. Have you seen the way that we run, practically anything, let alone our elections? No, this would, it would really, really extend the time that it takes to get our results. In Alaska right now, so they are collecting petitions and doing a great job. They should make the ballot with their ranked choice voting ban referendum. That's one of the things that they have is I guess back when Super Bowl time, but they put out a bunch of stickers that said, "Can you wait 3 weeks to get your Super Bowl results?" Alaskans need it now. Yeah, it's just some wild and crazy stuff. Ranked choice voting has been repealed in a few places, and it's a bipartisan thing, right? Like they repealed ranked choice voting in Aspen, Colorado. Right? This is not a conservative hotbed. They just beat a referendum that wanted to install ranked choice voting in Massachusetts. And it was conservative advocacy groups with very, very little money against out-of-state billionaires again, and they beat it back. So, on this fight, all hope is not lost. I think we certainly learned a lot and built some networks and way stronger than we were coming into it. But we're gonna have to stay on them because they're coming.
Yeah. Andy, I know you were in Springfield testifying for this stuff. You're an expert in all this stuff. I appreciate it. And the battle never ends, right? It just continues on. And so, Chris, it looks like that hopefully nobody's going to say, hey, this is maybe not perfect. It's not, but it's a place to start. Hopefully nobody on our side of the aisle says that.
Let's hope not. Have a bad time saying that.
And it sounds like Andy just basically wants flat rejection of this entire package. And so hopefully it comes up short here in the next few days as we go back to Springfield tomorrow. We go in at 11. The Senate, I think, is in at 1. And we'll see if they can get the budget deal done by Friday night and be adjourned before the Memorial Day weekend.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right, Andy, thank you so much. Any closing thoughts, Andy? We'll go to Chris, and then we'll say goodnight.
No, just contact your state rep and your state senator and ask them to oppose SB 2123.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Chris, any closing thoughts? And then we're going to go to close.
No, not really. It's just important for you all out there to stay informed and stay educated. Make sure you're listening to the right voices and not the propaganda spin machine of the radical left. And so we can win this, but we got to hang together.
Exactly. And guys, again, we appreciate you tuning in and sharing and liking and following and subscribing to our content as things maybe develop over the next 72 hours. If things are worthy of breaking in, we may go live sometime this week over the next few days. So just stay tuned in and ready for that, and make sure you click the notification so that when you go live, you'll get that. Again, we want to say special thanks to Andy for joining us tonight. Andy, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. All right. With that, we're going to say good night.
Good.